However, I think that something greater is happening here. I think that all of these storms, both outer and inner, are actually colluding for our evolutionary benefit. There's an idea. I think that we are being pushed to transform beyond a level of consciousness that clearly no longer works. We are now being called on an inward voyage to awaken what I'm calling the Centripetal Christ, which is that divine center that draws us to itself. So today, we're going to start by planning our inward voyage. And we're going to use these storms to help awaken our true self, which is the Christ center. We're going to get our metaphysical bearings from one of my favorite stories, that of Jesus calming the storm. Then we're going to center our compass on the Centripetal Christ as the goal of our journey. And we're going to get a little bit of guidance from New Thought pioneer Emily Cady. I don't know, probably some of you have heard of her. She wrote Lessons in Truth, which is kind of the primer for unity. But we're going to look at her two regions of focus that will help us to create some new habits of consciousness. And then finally, because this is unity and we are very practical and we like to apply what we learn here, we're going to look at some practical navigational tools to help us create some habits that will awaken the Christ center within us. So are you ready to start our voyage? Well, let's get started at the beginning. Every voyage requires some planning, right? So the first step in planning your voyage is to, next slide please, answer the call to passage. We have to get the invitation, right? And then we have to answer it. You recall that in that story, Jesus actually invites the disciples to get onto the boat with him, and they had to be willing. They had to show up and suit up and get on that boat. If we are willing to cross the waters and brave the storms, then something new can await us on the other side. This call to passage can actually be a journey of awakening, if we wish. Now, our second step is to chart the storms. If we're going to plan a voyage, we want to know what lies ahead of us, right? We want to know what's going on around us. So we can chart our storms by becoming observant of what's going on around us. What are those circumstances that seem to be triggering us? And then how are we reacting? What are our feelings? What are we feeling? Am I just feeling anxiety? Am I enraged? Am I frustrated? What's going on? So you want to actually get specific with the emotions. And then notice your thoughts. If you can step back and notice what you're thinking and feeling, then you're no longer identifying with it. And then those feelings and thoughts don't have quite as much power over you. And a really excellent way to chart these feelings and thoughts is to get a journal out. And I'm sure some of you do that already. And just start writing down, God, what are my negative thoughts today? What was that feeling that really kind of overwhelmed me and sort of hijacked me in the middle of that meeting? So start writing those things down and getting some clarity. Our next step in planning our voyage is to consult a map. And in Unity, we can create a metaphysical map for this inward voyage. Now, when I talk about metaphysical interpretations, sometimes that can be a little bit confusing. So it's like, what do we mean? In Unity, we like to go in and read a story or read the Bible and go into some deeper levels. So we're going beyond maybe the literal interpretation or the historical interpretation, and we're looking at a metaphysical understanding of it. And when I create metaphysical interpretations, I like to use two different works. And the first one is The Revealing Word. Have you all heard of that book? That's a really, really important one. And then the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And both were written by our Unity co-founder, Charles Fillmore. If you're interested, you can go out to one of my favorite websites, other than Cyclocade. It's truthunity.org. truthunity.org. And you can find free versions of these books and many other things that'll help you in your Unity education. So today, let's go to the next slide, please. We're going to look at a story from Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. And this is a story where Jesus stills the storm. So let's go through it. I'm going to read it. I'm going to invite you to read along. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed. A windstorm suddenly arose on the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" I think that's such a powerful story. It always gives me goosebumps when I go through that one. So we're going to do sort of a little metaphysical interpretation of this just very quickly. I've pulled out 5 different words or phrases that I think are kind of important in getting a little bit deeper understanding so we can apply this to our lives. Now, the first word is, of course, the boat, what we're going to be conveyed with. Now, metaphysically, a boat can represent a positive state of consciousness. You know, we can start off in a positive state. A boat can also represent the physical body, which is also a vehicle, right? Our second word is water, or the sea. And metaphysically, the water represents the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious is interesting because it's like a blank tablet, and we can program it with whatever it is we hold in the conscious mind. So whatever you hold in mind, whether it's positive or negative, is directly fed into the subconscious. Our third phrase is Jesus asleep. It's kind of an interesting condition. Jesus asleep. Well, Jesus metaphysically is the Christ center, that spiritual highest self. But when the Christ center is asleep, metaphysically that means that it's at peace, that it's at rest even when there's a lot of turmoil all around us. Our fourth word, and this is one of the key words, is storm. Now, a storm happens metaphysically whenever the subconscious starts churning up because it's had a lot of unstable negative thoughts and feelings programmed into it. And then the storm is at the subconscious level. And when it's at that level, you kind of don't feel like you have much control over it, do you? Because it's subconscious. So we feel overwhelmed. Fortunately, the Christ Center has the power to calm that subconscious storm. And our last little phrase is Jesus being awakened. So this happens metaphysically whenever we start to wake up and become conscious of our Christ center. When we finally realize that we are divine at our core, that is our true identity. That is the awakening. So now that we've done a little bit of planning for our voyage, let's talk about this centering of our compass. So we want to have our compass on our destination, which is going to be the Centripetal Christ. And let's move to the next slide, please. Now, we're going to talk about Emily Cady's article called Finding the Christ in Ourselves. And this was her very first brochure that she published on her own. And actually, this was the brochure that got Charles Fillmore's attention. And then he later asked her to write Lessons in Truth. But having said that we're going to talk about two regions, I want to make a caveat. I have a little quotation up there. I hope you can read it. I'm going to read it to you, which I think kind of describes this caveat. It says, the nature of God is a circle of which the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. Has anyone heard this quote before? It's been attributed to a lot of other authors, but I kept going back, and it actually goes back to Empedocles, say that 3 times fast, who was a philosopher from the 5th century BC. So I think he probably was the original one. So this quote is reminding us that we're not talking about a geographical location. When we talk about the center and the circumference, these are not really destinations in space, but they are levels in consciousness. And God is omnipresent. God is everywhere present. So the only thing that supposedly separates us is our focus. Remember, God goes nowhere. We're the ones that are moving around, right, with our focus. So let's talk a little bit about the two regions that Emily Cady describes in her brochure. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the circumference. And you see that outer band on the circle. The circumference, that's the outer region of your life. This is a level of consciousness that always has an outward focus, that is paying attention only to the circumstances, that only lives in the mortal or the physical world, relies on the input of the 5 senses. That's its truth. And the circumference is a consciousness that only sees the lack. It only sees sickness. It only sees poverty. It only sees suffering. Woe is me. That's the circumference. Our second region, however, we're saying it's at the center, but remember it's not geographical, is the Christ center. Now this level of consciousness has an inward focus. This consciousness is the spiritual self. It's perfect. It's already perfect. You don't have to do anything. It's unchanging, and it is that part of you that is immortal. The Christ center only sees wholeness and only sees abundance. There is nothing else. Now, this Christ center, you'll notice from the title of my talk, I chose to call it the Centripetal Christ. And like, what the heck does she mean by that? That's really weird. Is that a centipede? That's what my aunt said. Is that like an insect? No. The Centripetal Christ refers to the power of the awakened Christ center to draw us into itself, like the force of gravity. That is centripetal force, when you're being pulled inward to the center. Hence, Centripetal Christ. When we are living at the circumference, we are constantly moving outward. Remember I said it was an outward focus? So we're moving outward into greater density, and whenever you move outward, like you think on a tire, like if you move out to the rim of a tire, that's centrifugal force, because you're moving out. But when you move inward, you've got your centripetal force. So moving outward, you move to greater density. When you move inward, you move to lesser density. As you become less dense, I know I want that, you become transparent to spirit. So more of the divine light shines through you. Another reason it's a centripetal force for this Christ center is that its very nature is love. Infinite love magnetizes and pulls us into the center with that inward centripetal force. And Cady says that Christ center has always loved us, has always been pure love. We just didn't know it. So now that we've learned how to center our compass using the regions and using centripetal force to find our Christ center to be pulled inward, let's talk about some practical navigational tools that can help us to awaken this Christ center. Well, Emily Cady says we need to create some new habits. We've kind of gotten some not so good habits. So in order to create these new habits of consciousness, we're going to have to do a little bit of work. Habits take work. We have to lay down new neural pathways into our bodies. So we begin with trust. That sounds easy, right? That doesn't sound like a lot of work. We trust that God is the source of all our needs, right? But then we have to start, what Katie says, doing a labored effort. I love that term. Do a labored effort until those new habits are created and they become more automatic for you. Katie reminds us that Jesus sought constant, conscious contact. That's a lot of C's. Conscious contact, constantly with God. And we are called to do the same. Do you do conscious contact constantly? We're working on it, right? We're making a labored effort. So as we do that conscious communion, we can make that a habit so we can awaken our Christ center. So the first set of tools I want to talk about are ones that I'm sure you're very familiar with, since you all have been Unity students for a while, I'm sure. And those are denials and affirmations. And Katie says that when we use our denials and affirmations, we speak from authority as children of God, created in the image of the divine. And we speak from our center. And if you don't feel it, act as if, right? Fake it till you make it. Now, I want to talk about denials just a little bit. They can be a little confusing because you think, well, I don't want to be in denial, right? Well, we're not denying the facts of a situation. We're not denying the fact that somebody had an accident or something happened or they're in the hospital. What we are denying is the power of those circumstances or our negative thinking over our lives. We can rebuke the power of these events or these thoughts just like Jesus rebuked the winds and the sea. We are in fact called to do this. We can rebuke our circumference. We deny that it's the absolute truth because it's not. It's constantly changing. So once we've done our denials, I always like to say it's like erasing a blackboard with our denials. We've cleared out the space. Then we can use our affirmations. And an affirmation is claiming our spiritual truth. And we do it with authority. We call forth what already exists in our Christ center. It just hasn't manifested yet in the outer. But we know it's already true in our center. That is a true affirmation. And we say it with certainty. Katie says that we have to affirm spiritual good for ourselves every day. And I wanted to share one of her affirmations that's in this brochure that we're using today. I thought this one was really beautiful. Christ in me, and my microphone, is my life, and Christ is perfect. I'm going to invite you to repeat that one with me, just to get that feeling in you. Christ in me is my life, and Christ is perfect. Feel that frequency. Our second tool. I'm calling this one the prayer of Christ activation. That's not what Katie called it, but that's my name for it. Katie said that there's really only one simple prayer that we need to repeat in order to find the Christ in ourselves. And it's not the Lord's Prayer. That would have been my first thought. But Katie says, repeat, thy will be done. Thy will be done. I have to share with you, I struggled with that particular prayer in my youth. Because I thought, well, if I have to say, thy will be done and not mine, that means I have to give up what I want. That means I have to make some sacrifice, and that I don't really want what God's going to bring in, but I just have to give into it. So I had to change my thinking about that. I had to gain some understanding. Katie says that God's will is to express more of itself through you. Oh my God, it's so simple. It's so basic. There's not a laundry list. God's will is just to express more of itself through you. I think that's a tremendous relief. That's God's will. If we just let go and allow this divine will to flow through us, to express more of itself through us, then we are pulled inward through love into that centripetal Christ. Our last tool, I call this the time travel tool. Oh, and let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I forgot to tell you. So we had denials and affirmations. I warned her I would forget to signal her. We had denials and affirmations, the prayer of Christ activation, and now we're going to talk about time shifting. Where does God exist?
Everywhere, all present.
When does God exist?
Always.
Now, right? Now, yeah. God is in the eternal now, and our Christ self exists only in the eternal now, not in the future. So, whenever you claim your divine identity, do it in the present. Whenever you do your affirmations and your denials, you always phrase them in the present tense. And I noticed that you all were doing that. You had everything in the I am now. Things are happening right now. Give thanks just as Jesus did for what is already true on the spiritual plane. Even if you don't see it, even if circumstances seem to be contrary, you claim it is already true. So we have looked at some really interesting things about our inward voyage today. We have learned how to plan our own voyage, first by answering the call. Answer that invitation. Chart out your thoughts and feelings. Get a journal and write down what you're thinking and feeling each day. You need to create a metaphysical map, and today we use the story of Jesus calming the storm. Then we learned how to center our compass on our ultimate goal, which is the centripetal Christ. We talked about Emily Cady's two regions, the circumference, the outer rim of the sphere, and then the Christ center, right in the center. We talked about how the centripetal Christ is that which has this inward power, just like gravity. And then we remember that the nature of the Christ center is love, which also magnetizes us with that centripetal force. And then finally, we looked at some practical navigational tools to awaken your Christ center. Denials and affirmations, stated in the positive and present. The prayer of thy will be done to activate your Christ. And the time travel one, shifting into the eternal now, so you connect with the Christ now. So the exciting news is that your inward voyage is underway. You have set sail today, and we are navigating from the circumference into the center of our being. So I know that you all have been tossed a lot by the winds and the sea of all the storms in your lives, by maybe the doubts and the fears and maybe even some old false beliefs that have cropped up. But we can still these storms through some positive habits of consciousness and through a realization of our divine identity. Right now is the time to awaken your centripetal Christ so that you can illuminate from within like the sun and become the brilliant eye of the storm. Namaste. Thank you. And I'd like to invite you now for a time of meditation as we go within and continue our inward voyage. I invite you to get comfortable in your chair, closing your eyes if you wish. And just for a moment, feel yourself grounded, your feet on the floor. Relax your shoulders and begin to notice your breath. With each breath, allow yourself to let go. Noticing your thoughts and just let them kind of float by like clouds. Allow your consciousness now to drift downward toward your heart center. And take just a moment now in the stillness to connect with your own Christ center. Imagine that you're walking out onto a beach and there's a boat waiting for you. Step into that boat and allow yourself to be drawn across the still waters. Notice the beautiful blue sky, seagulls flying over you, and a light breeze touching your face. All is at peace within your soul as you drift across the water. And you notice far off in the distance, on the horizon, is a dark cloud, a storm that's far away from you. You're just in your observer self, noticing it. And I invite you to think of a situation in your life that feels like a storm, having some distance from it right now. What is it that's been disturbing you or has been on your mind? And as you think of a situation, it could even be something on the national level. It doesn't have to be personal. Begin to notice what you've been thinking. Have there been some negative thoughts coming up for you? Just see if anything pops up. If not, no pressure. Now begin to notice any feelings that you've had about this situation in your life. What emotions have been coming up for you? Just be curious. And some of this information may come to you later. That's okay. We give it permission. But just be here with the experience. As you have greater awareness about your reactions to this situation, I now invite you to silently say a denial that this situation has no power over my spirit. And breathe it out. I invite you to affirm silently to yourself, I am the light of Christ. I am the light of Christ. And we let go into this perfect moment, allowing thy will be done. We are expressing more of the Christ light to ourselves. We are awakening. And we are so grateful for our perfect spirit, our perfect life as divine beings. And now the boat is gently drawing back towards the shore as we give thanks and leave the boat and notice where we are, feeling our feet on the floor, noticing the room around us, and becoming aware that our own light is shining through it all. And so it is. Amen.
I always like being up here and looking at everybody after they're coming out of meditation. They all look so relaxed, ready to do it. I want to thank Reverend Cato for a wonderful message and a really great meditation. Thank you very much. And now it is the time for our offering. Now is the time to enter into giving consciousness. Today I affirm, I give joyously, generously, abundantly, and my good is increased and multiplied 1,000-fold. Do you feel that way? Okay. If you feel led by Spirit today to give, we invite you to prepare your gift now. For those who have arranged their giving by other means, you can hold the thought of your gift in your mind and in your heart, in acknowledging the Spirit and divine presence that lives, moves, and has being in us as we say, thank you. Thank you to all who have continued blessing this community. with your tithes and offerings. We are truly blessed by your giving. If Spirit is guiding you to give today, you can give here, right now, as the ushers go around with bags, or you can mail us a check, or you can go online. That's the easiest way. Just go to our website, the bottom of every page, it says donate. It's all done. So, I invite you to put your hands together over your heart as you feel led, as we say our offering blessing. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And so it is. And now the music team will come back up.
And we will be singing, How Could Anyone? The words will be on the screen. Please sing with us.
How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How deeply you're connected to my soul.
All right, it's time in our service to get into our circle for us to sing our peace song. And remember, we do have potluck today, and if you didn't bring anything, please still join us. We have plenty, more than enough. Cue the song. Now let's end our service with a jazzed up prayer of protection. Light of God surrounds us. Love of God enfolds us. Power of God protects us. Blessed of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is.
on your inward voyage to your centripetal Christ.
We are united. One more time. Wherever